So what is the Climate Majority Project? Well, basically, we exist to mainstream climate action. We are for everybody who cares, and that is the majority, but who doesn't want to glue themselves to anything. It's a kind of short way of describing it. And we are keen on mobilizing people wherever they have potential power in their lives. And that typically means with other people. So we've got on the board here, what can you do as an individual? Whenever I'm asked that question, my first reply is, don't be an individual. The way to actually get somewhere on this is to work together with other people and to find your power together with them. For many people, that's going to be working where they live to adapt and make more resilient the place where they live. For fortunate people like yourselves, it can be through your profession. So that's why we have formed the Future of Insurance Working Group, which is a confidential group where we bring together people in and around the insurance industry to work with us on seeing how together we can, well, make a future. And it's because of the work of that group that I'm here this evening. So to stress again, I'm not an insurer. If I say anything really kind of naive or shows an ignorance of how the industry works, please try to forgive that. But I do have, as it were, standing behind me, the people that I work with who are brilliant people who are in the industry. So what do I want to suggest to you very briefly to get us going here? Firstly, in terms of what we should be thinking of as we act as the climate majority, as the silent majority, to save our future together. And secondly, more specifically about you in insurance. So just one further word on the first thing. What we believe is that we have to begin from the truth. And the truth is very bad, very difficult. And that's already actually a connection with insurance, because there are some people in this world who know how bad the truth is on where we are better than others. So those people obviously include climate scientists. They also include some civil servants. They include some risk managers, and they include people in insurance, right? You have access to a lot of data about what's actually going on because you need that data to not go bankrupt. So one of the things that insurers can helpfully do is disclose to the world what is happening. There was a very brilliant report recently called Planetary Solvency, produced by actuaries and a couple of insurers, which kind of points in that kind of direction. And that's a way that everybody can step up. So what we say in the Climate Majority Project is we've got to begin from the truth, but it's not enough to just lay the truth on people. People have to be able to process the truth, because it's a difficult truth. People have to be able to handle it together. So that means, for example, that when people are taught, when students are taught in university or schools what's going on, they ought to be offered psychological resourcing to help them handle what they're hearing. Because when you actually learn the truth about where we're at in the world, it's really hard to hear. And people need to be shown manageable, accessible pathways to agency to act on the crisis. And as I say, that's going to be different for different people, so that there need to be different possible pathways. There isn't just one simple silver bullet here. It's going to be different depending on who you are, what you care about, what your talents are, what your role is in life. And finally, people need to understand that they are part of a silent majority which is starting to move into action. So that there needs to be collective awareness. A lot of people, I noticed this at the conference yesterday, quite a few people I spoke to said to me things like, it's my first time here. I thought I was kind of the only person who thought this way or worried about these things. And it's great to be among this group who are seeking to work together. And that's a really valuable role that events like this can play, also coming to realize, oh yes, we are part of something bigger. Now, turning to some more specifics about what I think you can and should do in insurance, let me say this. There is a great devastation coming on a business as usual pathway. I'm not talking about what's going to happen to the world. I'm talking about what's going to happen to insurance on a business as usual pathway, right? An uninsurable world means, first and foremost, a world without any insurance industry in it. And sometimes people in insurance say, well, yeah, but is it such a big deal for us, the climate crisis, because we can rewrite our policies every 12 months. But what you're looking at, if that's all you do, is a policy pool, a pool of customers that gets smaller and smaller and smaller, perhaps quite quickly, perhaps unmanageably quickly. This is an existential risk for humanity, and before that, for the insurance industry. And your interests as insurers are fundamentally non-aligned with those of, say, fossil fuel companies or airplane companies or big agriculture, who are your interests fundamentally aligned with? Well, funnily enough, they're fundamentally aligned with people like us and with activists and with flooded people, right? That, for example, there is a new organization in this country called Flooded People. It's trying to mobilize people who are vulnerable to flood in this country, right? That organization, Flooded People, recently had a meeting with a major insurer in this country. They spoke to the CEO. And the CEO said to them, he was absolutely right, he said to them, it's great to meet you people because, we need to help you and you can also help us, right? That's who your interests are fundamentally aligned with. Citizens, a future, right? That's why the insurance industry is special. That's why we bother to take a big interest in it in the Climate Majority Project. We think it's a key point of leverage. And how can you get that leverage? Well, that's set out in the chapter on insurance in this book, and it's set out in the slide deck, which we'll be sharing. But very briefly, just to give a couple of indicators. Firstly, there is a whole swathe of stuff that insurers can do directly as insurers to start to change the situation. By creating, for example, underwriting policies which are more prone to encourage resilience and adaptation. And innovation is needed in insurance to make that easier. For example, parametric insurance, which is tied to creating the funding which can enable resilience, which can enable anticipatory action. Or there's also a great need for longer-term policies in insurance. We should move away from just 12-month policies. We should be having reinsurers who are willing to say, yeah, let's have 5-year policies, let's have 10-year policies, let's lock everybody in so we can build on our common interests to create much more resilience and to have less climate disasters in the first place or less exposure to risk. So that's just a set of examples, and you may well be aware of others already. There's a lot of room and a lot of need to innovate in the space and to move in the direction of what we call transformative adaptation. And secondly, and ultimately, what actually needs to happen, of course, is for there to be a completely different scale and order and nature of government action. How is that going to happen? Well, I'll tell you how it's going to happen. You're going to tell the government that that's what's needed. Right? That's what actually needs to happen. Insurers need to step up and say, we want you to regulate us, and more importantly, to regulate the whole business space, to drive out bad actors, to stop helping fossil fuel companies and big ag and so on and so forth, to start actually building a future in which we can operate and we can continue to do business, right? Because as I say, on a business as usual pathway, a great devastation is coming. First for you guys, then for the rest of the world. But if we take the alternative path, transformative adaptation, lobbying governments for the kind of action that is needed, then the insurance industry can prosper. Because guess what? Unfortunately, we are moving into a world with more risk and more potential exposure. That should be a world with more insurance, not less. So let's make it so.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rupert.